Hello and welcome back to the Oxbridge Formula. Today we're here with Cath, who studies natural sciences at Cambridge. Would you like to tell me a little bit about yourself?
I am a first year biological natural sciences student at I absolutely love it. Very, very fond of my college, obviously. And I think that applying for NATSC at Cambridge, even though I definitely didn't think I was going to get in, is one of the best things that have happened to me. So
Yeah, that's really nice to hear. I think what I'm curious about is I'm a biochemist at Oxford. So like obviously I went down the more like pure science route. So what was it that attracted you to natural sciences at Cambridge?
Well, I mean, one massive factor is that I grew up in Oxford, so I really wanted like a change of scenery, a change of environment. But I'd always struggled choosing between biology and chemistry as to which I wanted to do. And a lot of people told me to do biochemistry, but I thought like I really liked physical science, like physical chemistry as well. And I knew that I wouldn't get that so much if I did biochemistry. And the way that natural sciences was structured at Cambridge was so great because you can start out being so broad, but you still get the same level of depth, the same level of detail, and like you can still go into each subject in as much detail as you possibly want, but you don't have to choose just yet, which I really liked. So
Yeah, I mean that's definitely fair if you want that breadth, and I suppose it gives you more time to sort of find the area that you're really interested in, rather than just like
yeah,
going straight in with biochemistry and then being like, oh, that was actually a mistake. Whoops. So yeah,
no, yeah, exactly. If you're not sure, it's a great way to keep your options open.
it's a really good point actually. So what modules did you pick for first year?
So I took biology of cells, mathematical biology, evolution and behavior, and chemistry, um, which is kind of a weird combination because I didn't take physiology, but I was really happy with my combination and I thought it worked out really well. So you can pretty much choose whatever you like, no matter how weird the combination is.
Wow, that's really good. And yeah, I guess like through that you can get such like a broad overview of all these topics and then pick what you want the best. Because I was looking at the course before online, and then it looks like there's so many options for second year, like such a broad like variety of options.
Yeah. It's really strange because I came into first year like knowing that I wanted to do definitely like biology of cells and chemistry, and I wasn't really sure about the third one. And I ended up choosing evolution and behavior because I thought I would hate it the least out of the other options. And it's ended up being like probably my favorite. So it's really cool to be able to get that experience of studying things that you're not sure about at higher level and then discovering new things that you really enjoy.
Yeah, definitely. You say that's your favorite. What has been your favorite lecture series within that, or your favorite aspect of that course?
Oh, we did a lecture series on like the origins of life, which was really amazing. So like how the first cells evolved, and like the evolution of respiration and chloroplast, mitochondria, and stuff like that. That was absolutely fascinating. So that was probably my favorite.
Oh, that's really cool. Because you have such like a wide range of modules, you must have a lot of contact hours.
Yeah, so a typical day I'll have two lectures every day, Monday to Saturday, and then normally I'll probably have some labs and a supervision as well. So it's probably on average like 4 or 5, maybe more contact hours a day. Like my busiest day, I would start with lectures at 9 and I would have a supervision at 6:15. So I would finish my day at 7:15 in the evening.
How do you find that?
Um, it's a lot, but you know, when you really enjoy your subject, it's worth it. But it can be really, really intense. I guess it's just something you get used to, and in a way, the sort of intensity of the environment kind of bonds you and your friends, like supporting each other, and it ends up being like a really nice community.
No, that's really nice. What would you give like a tip to somebody who's just started Cambridge and they were facing the first year workload? What would be your top tip for dealing with that?
Well, I'd probably say like realize that you don't have to do everything perfectly. So when I first arrived, especially with maths, I was really worried about handing in pieces of work that I didn't think were perfect and that I hadn't found like the solution. I knew the solution was wrong. I would just leave the question blank. And eventually my supervisor got in touch with my director of studies who had to have a talk with me and said to me, look, no one's expecting perfection. If you keep striving for perfection, you're going to break yourself down. You've just got to do the best you can. It's okay if you can't hand in all the work always. It's okay if you don't find the solution sometimes. You just have to do your best. And that to me was really eye-opening. I think that really helped me through.
Yeah, I think there is this perception that you have to do everything perfectly at Oxford and Cambridge, and it's just not the case, especially because some of the things are so complex. They don't expect you to get an answer, like they just want to see how you approach it. And yeah, I think that is a misconception that like I'm glad you've
Yeah,
cleared up.
definitely.
Yeah. So yeah, so you have this intense workload and a lot of contact hours. How do you balance that with your social life?
I mean, well, people find different sort of levels on the scale. I think to some extent, if you really want a proper social life, you probably have to sacrifice work a little bit. But as I said, if you end up, not sacrificing work at all, staying in a room, all you do is work and you sacrifice your social life, your work will suffer as well. So I think it's just about, trying to find time in your day, trying to work effectively, go to the library, sit down and just work for a few hours rather than doing bits here and there, because then you feel overloaded, you feel like you have no free time. So I guess the way I did it is I would, go to my lectures in the morning, then I'd go to the library, I'd have lunch, go to the library, do my work, get it all done, and I would be free pretty much every evening. So if you can be like efficient with your work and find little gaps in your day where you can do your work, then you can end up having a lot more free time than you think you would.
Yeah, I think that's a really good tip because I think that's something that I still don't do is I don't set myself like an aim to be done by a certain time or something or like rest from this time. So I just put it off and then I'm like, oh, it's like 9 p.m. I need to do some work. It's a nightmare.
But yeah,
So
exactly. And then you find yourself in the library at 1 o'clock in the morning.
exactly,
What have
like
I
it's
done?
such a bad life choice, honestly.
I know.
Are you involved in any societies then alongside your degree?
I sort of was at the beginning, and then I kind of lost touch with them all, to be honest. But I do a lot of like mixed netball and sort of college sport. I really like the ability to do college sport that's sort of not that competitive. You don't have to show up every week, but it's just a really nice break. It's really fun. It's really casual. But it's not quite the commitment that like uni sport or some uni societies are. So I've really enjoyed that. Especially like college mixed lacrosse and mixed netball and things like that.
Yeah, I think it's nice that you do that as well to sort of like it's something to look forward to. And
Yeah.
yeah, I always say to people like the thing that gets you through the workload is having things to look forward to. So yeah,
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
yeah.
Like having things to do at the end of the day will make you do your work during the day, otherwise you're going to be there for ages.
It's like, oh, I have to do this now so I can go to the pub with my friends, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
So um yeah, what's a lecture series you haven't enjoyed?
Oh, well, there was one lecture series in chemistry that was thermodynamics. And not to say I didn't find it interesting, but the entire lecture series was just like, here's an equation that you have to know in thermodynamics. This is its derivation, learn it. And I hated that so much. That was not at all my sort of style of learning. It was not something I was interested in. And I just switched off. Like in the lectures, I didn't listen. And then when it came to the end of year exams, it was not fun. So, however much you dislike a lecture course, you still need to be mentally present is what I've learned the hard way this year.
Oh yeah, no, definitely. Because I mean,
Mm.
you can just sit in the lecture and completely just not listen, but all you've got is those lecture notes, and I don't know if it's the same with Cambridge, but they're not always the best things. You do need like additional
No.
handwritten notes.
The worst thing is when they leave like little gaps in the notes for you to fill in during the lecture and you haven't been listening, and then you're just thinking you're missing a vital piece of information.
Yeah, that is very relatable. Do you have a lot of like, do you have a good relationship with your course mates in your college? Because I suppose that you guys would work together a lot for like I don't know tutes and supervisions in Cambridge.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, we walk to lectures together every day, and in labs as well. In the bigger labs like biology of cells for the larger subjects, you're often paired with people like in your own college, so you do get quite a tight knit group. But something that's quite nice about it is that unlike medicine, for example, the NATSCI group isn't necessarily exclusive. Like it's not so much of a clique like some sort of subjects form. But it definitely is a friendship group, and more than anything, it's a support group. You know that if you're really struggling with a piece of supervision work, you can go to someone else, and it's not like school. There's no competition. There's no sort of I'm not going to help you with your work because that will reflect badly on me. It's just genuine people just trying to get through it together and really like supporting and helping each other, which I think is lovely.
Yeah, that's really nice because I mean, the competitive nature would just ruin the whole thing. And I think people do get scared off that Oxford and Cambridge is like really competitive between each other. So that's really nice to hear.
Yeah, exactly.
And what is the hardest thing you've like come across this year? Like the thing you've struggled with the most?
Oh, I probably struggled with, fighting my sort of need for everything to be perfect. That to me was a really big battle. And sort of coming from, I know it's cliche, I know everyone says it, but coming from being like a big fish in a little pond to a very little fish in a very big pond, and suddenly you're not the best at everything, and suddenly they're teaching you things that you don't understand, and there's a chance that you're never going to understand it, and that's really, really difficult to accept for the kinds of people that end up at Oxbridge. So I think just sort of getting to terms with your own normality can be quite tough, but it's also quite refreshing in a way.
Yeah, I think that's really, really nice. And I guess because you do such a range of subjects, does the work you have set for them vary? As in, like, do you have essays in one subject, like problem sheets in the other, or anything like that?
Yeah, massively. So we would have about a problem, like we would have one example sheet for maths every week that would take an hour, 2 hours, whereas you get set an essay in evolution and behavior that you would spend a whole Sunday in the library to complete. I mean, I would spend a whole Sunday in the library to complete, maybe not everyone, but it definitely varies, and it varies week on week as well, depending on how personally difficult you find the material. So I suppose it's quite unpredictable, but in a way it keeps you on your toes.
Have you got an example essay that you've written this year?
Yeah, so I mean, I've written loads of essays this year. There was one on like why animals exhibit altruism and why they're kind to each other, and sort of debunking the theory of group selection in that they do it for the good of the group, because that doesn't exist, and the fundamental reason is to pass on their own genetics for related individuals, which was a really cool essay. I really enjoyed writing
Selfish
it.
gene.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, that sounds really, really cool. Right. I suppose, like, do you always tackle an essay in the same way?
No, so it's very different between, particularly between evolution, behavior, and biology of cells. When we get cell biology essays, it's more kind of just a very long explanation of a concept or just lots of factual detail. Whereas in evolution behavior, it's much more of a, weighing up different factors and almost slightly more like a humanity, like a little bit more your opinion kind of matters. And you have to, weigh up different theories and stuff like that, which is a very different way of structuring an essay to biology of cells. I'm also taking history and philosophy of science next year, which is going to be way different to like everything else as well. So that's, yeah, definitely more humanities based, and that'll be a totally different way of writing essays as well.
Wow, that's so cool, because all of our biochemistry essays are kind of in that, like you said, like it's just lots of facts and you're talking through a process and
Yeah.
things like that. So that's really interesting. And what are your modules for next year? What have you picked?
So I think this is liable to change, but I think I'm going to take chemistry B, which is organic and inorganic chemistry, as opposed to like physical and quantum chemistry. That's way too hard for me. Biochemistry and molecular biology, and then also history and philosophy of science. So quite a weird mix, I think, but I have been sure for ages that I wanted to do history and philosophy of science. So I'm really excited for that.
Yeah, and I think it'll be like a nice difference from like the more sciencey based
Yeah,
subjects. It'd be nice to
definitely.
have that, yeah, that difference. So what are you looking to do after your degree? Because like you just said, those modules are so broad. Like I can't see like a clear path, so it's really cool. What are you thinking of doing?
I can't see a clear path. But I think at the moment, I think I want to go into marine conservation, marine biology, particularly with coral, like looking at coral bleaching and stuff like that. Which is, I'm also taking a slightly weird route through my degree to get there. So I really have no idea what I'm going to end up doing. But it's really nice that, knowing that you graduate with a degree in natural sciences gives you so many options. You can pretty much go into whatever science you want because you have such a broad basis that most employers and sort of research institutes will understand that you have a much higher level of understanding in a lot of topics than the average student, which is really cool.
Yeah, I suppose that's like a really good bragging point for like the Cambridge courses,
Yeah.
that you do have such like a broad like overview of everything. So yeah, that's really a good point. And that sounds exciting. Like you don't hear a lot of people like talking about marine conservation, like from a natural sciences degree. They always sort of go into like more research in the lab sort of thing. So that sounds Like,
Yeah,
it's
I've always
interesting.
loved like the ocean and diving, and I want to be, I mean, next summer I'm going to do my professional dive qualifications. So I hopefully I can end up doing like something, kind of sciencey, but also like really fun. So
That's so good because it proves that you don't have to be stuck in a lab to do like a science
exactly.
job. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
really, really good
exactly.
because that the idea of being stuck in a lab all of my life really does
I
not
know
appeal.
that's not for me either, but
No.
I think guess like the interface of science and being like out in the open in nature. I mean, that's what it's all about, really, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. That's so, so good. And you're seeing it applied, like the science is applied to like stuff that you're seeing with your eyes
Yeah,
rather than just
please.
like
Yeah,
pipettes and things. So yeah, that's really, really
yeah.
cool. So let's take it back to your application to Cambridge. So we've talked a little bit about why you picked Cambridge over Oxford. But what other universities did you look at? And did you look at any of the courses?
Yeah, so actually at all my other universities I applied for chemistry, which is a bit different, but it was a very difficult choice to choose between, chemistry, biology, biochemistry, neurobiology. I had no idea. And for me, just being able to apply for natural sciences was just such a relief. I didn't have to make the decision. But my personal statement was actually for chemistry, which is why, the option to submit like an extra personal statement on the SAQ, the application questionnaire that Cambridge send you, was really nice because I could say, yes, my personal statement is for chemistry, but I love biology and this is why I want to do natural sciences.
Yeah, that's really, really good. And I suppose that is a great perk of Cambridge because they are aware that they do some like courses that lots of other universities
Yeah,
don't. So that's really
yeah,
cool.
exactly.
But yeah, I'd like to start on the personal statement side because I suppose that's like
Mhm.
universal in
Yeah.
the UK. So how did you demonstrate your passion on your personal statement? What are your top tips for that?
Well, I mean, I've been reading around my subject because I'm a massive nerd for years, so that was really helpful just to be able to put down kind of books you've read, lectures you've been to, articles, anything that piques your interest. For almost a year, I was just writing down every time I saw anything related to chemistry or related to anything that I wanted to do. I just put it in a notes page on my phone, and then when it came round to actually writing my personal statement, I looked through it and there was, lectures and articles and books I'd read, and it was actually so easy to put it together. I think that's something that's massively useful. If you can keep everything that you want to write about and everything that demonstrates that you've been interested over an extended period of time, then that really is the best way to show that you are committed and that you are going to be like a great student on your course.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And like the fact that you're going out of your way to like do so much extra reading or like go to lectures and things about your
Mm.
subject shows that you do have a genuine passion because you wouldn't do it if you didn't. You definitely wouldn't
Oh
do
yeah,
it.
exactly.
Yeah. So what did you exactly talk about in your personal statement? Like what sort of books or lectures?
So I went to a few lectures at Imperial College because I live really close by, and particularly there was one on photoelectrochemistry on like creating like green energy, and to me that tied in really well to a bunch of. So I'm really interested in like environmental science. I was on my school's like environmental action committee, and obviously the marine science. I've been on a few like conservation trips and stuff like that. So it all tied together really nicely, and I spoke quite a lot about that, as well as just the content briefly of some of the lectures that I've been to. And then something that I found that was really like useful and really easy to do is you mention something you've done and then you say like, well, this led me to research this. And then so it kind of shows that like, you didn't do it like performatively, you did it and then you actually were interested and then it led you to this and this, and kind of making it almost like a story, making it flow like that, I think sort of made the pieces fit together really nicely in the end.
Yeah, I think that's definitely like such a top tip is like don't just list things. They don't care if you've read
Yeah,
like one book
exactly.
or a million books. It's like you need to show you've engaged with it, and by
Hmm.
doing that, like you said, oh, this led me to do this or read this, then that's like the perfect way to do it. So yeah, definitely. What do you find the hardest thing about writing your personal statement?
The introduction. I I spent so long just sitting in front of my laptop trying to think of a first line that wasn't corny, and I didn't come up with one. However long it took me, I think I spent like the whole summer like writing down like first lines in a notes page on my phone or whatever. And I just got to the end, and I just thought you're never going to have a first line that's that original. Um, So, you know, just do your best to try and convey the way you feel about your subject and don't get hung up on it. If anything, write the body paragraphs and everything else first and then come back to the introduction at the end, because otherwise it just takes so long and you get so hung up on it and you make no progress on anything else.
Yeah, no, definitely. Do you remember what you wrote as your introduction?
Oh, something super cringy along the lines of like, the way that chemistry interacts with our daily world fascinates me, or something like that. Something just incredibly generic that, you know, is not different at all from anything that anyone else has written. But you almost, I mean, the people that are reading your personal statement have read thousands of these. They're not going to read the first line of your personal statement and expect it to be mind-blowing. And I think people get almost a bit too hung up on that, really.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if you do come across something that you think, oh, like this could be like a really cool, like personal first line, then definitely put it in. But if it
Yeah, of
doesn't just
course.
come naturally, like don't stress about it.
Exactly. It's not going to
Yeah,
ruin your chances. It's not the be all and end all. It's not even like anywhere near the most important part of your personal statement at all.
exactly. Yeah, I definitely agree. And then, like you said, after this, you got the SAQ, which is like specific to Cambridge. So what type of things did you talk about on there then?
So you don't have very much space to talk about it, but I mean, I would only really recommend you do it at all unless you only do it if you've applied for different subjects elsewhere. Otherwise, it's pretty much a waste of time. I think the idea of it is that, you know, if you've applied for, yeah, like I did, chemistry elsewhere and then natural sciences at Cambridge, I just said, you know, I really like biology, and I think that sort of the interfaces between the sciences and the borders between the sciences are becoming more and more arbitrary, and that's kind of where the most progress is being made at the moment. And I think that the natural sciences course really allows us to like exploit those sort of like boundaries that are a bit more grey and stuff like that. Essentially just drivel that showed them that you know, that's why I want to do NatSci. I don't really think it's that important. It probably doesn't influence your application at all, but it's nice as a personal thing to kind of explain why that's something that you want to do.
Yeah. I guess that sums it up. I guess it's just being like Cambridge specific and being like why Cambridge and why that course. So yeah, that's like a really good tip. And then you have to do the natural sciences admissions test, don't you?
Yeah,
So how did
yeah.
you
So
find that?
so awful. It was honestly like one of the worst experiences of my life. And I'm not trying to put anyone off, but I will also say that literally every single natural sciences student I've spoken to about it has said the same thing. Everyone thinks they failed it. Everyone thinks it's gone awfully. But that is because, you know, the standard of people that are applying to Cambridge NatSci is so high that they have to make the test ridiculously hard to even be able to separate people. So, you know, if you look at a past paper and you think this is impossible, you know, you're not the only one. There are people at Cambridge studying NatSci that thought the same. But it is very difficult, and you know.
How did you prepare then? How did you prepare?
So I prepared mostly by doing all sorts of past papers, like BMAT Section 2. You can do UK Maths Challenge questions that are quite similar. There aren't very many NSAA papers available online. I think there are 3 or 4, but those are really good to get the idea of the format. The format has also changed in 2020 from the way that previous years have sat it. So now the whole exam is multiple choice. But it's really good to be able to look at past papers, because I think one of the most important things with the NSAA is that the time pressure is so extreme that you have to be able to know how to tackle the questions in which order. You know, if you struggle particularly with maths, then, you know, get the easy marks on the other sections first and come back to it later. So I think that doing past papers is the best way to figure out how to approach the exam to make the maximum effect of your time.
Yeah, that's a really good tip. And I've heard from other people that have done like, I mean, any admissions test, the tip is to practice because it is so
Yeah,
time pressured,
exactly.
like you said. And did you look over any like old school work and things like that to help, like, I don't know, revise that to
Not
help?
particularly. I mean, for the NSAA, the section 1 is based off of GCSE knowledge, so it should all be stuff that was learned at GCSE. And section 2 is a little bit more complicated. It's mostly A level content, but AS level, so they're not expecting you to know anything that's normally taught in the A2 years.
Okay.
So, I mean, if you feel particularly not confident about a certain topic, you can look through, they have like a specification of assumed knowledge, so you can scroll through that, and if there's anything that, you know, strikes you as something that you're not confident about, then it would be worth looking over. But it is mostly basic knowledge. It's just that they take the basic knowledge and then find a way to ask a question that really stretches your understanding.
Okay, and how did it feel while you were sitting it? Like how did you sort of process the fear and things like that?
You don't. You're absolutely terrified. You walk into the exam hall, you sit down, and your brain just clears because you can't think about anything else. You don't have time to worry. You don't have time to be thinking, am I getting these questions wrong? You just have to do it. And it's so strange when you sit down, the clarity is just, you just start writing, and that's it. You just can't stop. So yeah, you've just got to trust that the adrenaline will take over.
Yeah, oh my God. I mean, I'm so lucky that with biochemistry I didn't have to do an admissions test to get in. But I know, literally, so lucky. But most courses for Oxbridge do require admissions tests, and so it's just really interesting to talk to people about their tips and advice and things. So
yeah,
thank you for that insight. And then I guess after that, I don't know if this is worse or better than the admissions test, but you have the interviews. How were they?
Also awful. I think for me, something that like really tripped me up was expecting the interviewers to think that I would get everything perfect, and the sort of pressure on myself to get every question right. And it was only afterwards that I realized that, you know, they're not asking you questions that they think you know the answer to, because if they think you know the answer to them, they're just essentially giving you a verbal A-level test. And that's a complete and utter waste of time for them. They want to see how you think. They want to hear you think out loud. They want to see sort of your train of thought. They want to see if you're a teachable person, if you're somebody that they would enjoy teaching. I probably realized that too late. But I mean, I said in my interview that 2 + 6 was 9. And the interviewer sort of chuckled at me, looked at me, and was like, do you want to double check that? And I went, no, I'm sure. And I mean, I'm still here. So it's not about getting everything necessarily factually correct. It's just about, you know, thinking straight, and silly mistakes don't matter because they know you're nervous. So don't get hung up on the little things. Just try to get the big picture.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to second that, because in my interview I said that DNA had ionic bonds, and he was like, don't you mean covalent? And I was like, yes, I do. That's exactly what I mean. So embarrassing. But yeah, like you said, like I'm still at Oxford studying biochemistry, so it doesn't matter if you do make silly little mistakes because they do know you're nervous. So what things were you asked? Can you give me like examples of like actual questions they asked in the interview and how you like tackled it?
Yeah, so one of my interviewers was a neuroscientist, and he asked me a few questions about action potentials, but at the time I hadn't learned anything about them. So it was some vague question about, you know, how do you think your body transmits nervous signals and things like that. And it was sort of in the context of a much wider question about are pH changes to enzymes or proteins generally, are they reversible? Initially I thought no. I thought, you know, if you put an enzyme in a high or particularly low pH solution, then you'll denature it, you can't get it back. Yeah. But he was saying, you know, what actually happens, like when you get hydrogen ions bonding to ion channels in the nervous system, then those changes are actually reversible. So you can actually have changes like because of pH and stuff like that. But he somehow led on to saying, he asked me, he said, if I made a cut in the back of my hand and it was bleeding, what could I put on it that I could buy in a supermarket that would make it hurt? And I was just floored. I had no idea what to say. I started listing off things like lemon, vinegar, salt. And, you know, after about 5 minutes of me guessing random supermarket items, he said, oh, did you not think about chili? And apparently, like, he then explained something to me about, you know, capsicum and how it works by, like, activating the sodium channels and stuff like that. And I thought, I've really messed this up. I spent 5 minutes of my interview listing items that you can buy in a supermarket. But it's these sort of weird, like, crazy questions that you get that, you know, it means that they're testing you and they're pushing you to see, like, how far your understanding can really go, which is actually a good sign.
Yeah, and the fact that you did, like, you gave lots of examples, you really did try with the question, shows that, like, you are teachable, like, you do contribute, and he could see the way you thought.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
that's what happens in supervisions. You don't know the answer, but they're gonna just sort of like give you hints along the way to try and push you to find the right
Yeah.
answer. So yeah, I think it's definitely great that you did that. What other questions were you asked?
I was also asked a little bit about the kidneys. So I was told, okay, so you know, or maybe you don't know. I knew I'd been taught about like how sodium was reabsorbed in the kidneys, but he said that, you know, if I didn't know that he would explain it to me. So he explains how sodium is reabsorbed, how sodium ions are reabsorbed in the kidneys, and then gives you another molecule and says, okay, well, knowing that, how do you think this is absorbed? I don't remember particularly what it was, but you had to sort of look at the little picture, the drawing that he'd given you, and try to figure out, having knowledge of one mechanism, how this other one might work, and try to sort of extrapolate it, which was a really interesting question, actually. And I didn't get it. So I sort of gave a mechanism that I thought would be plausible. And he ended up saying to me, that's not actually how it works, but that would be totally plausible and it's a reasonable answer. So he told me that, which made me feel a lot better about having gotten it wrong. But that's just another example of how, like, you don't have to get the question right. You just have to sort of like speak out loud and think out loud and just try to, you know, get your thoughts straight and come up with something that's reasonable.
Yeah, that's once again that's really similar with me. Is that like you don't have to get the right answer, but if you say something that's like intelligible and like it uses like
Mm.
sound scientific knowledge, then that's great too. Because I remember I had a question about like a ribonucleoprotein, and like we talked about how it like folds up and stuff because the protein helps it to fold. But then she had these like pipe cleaners that were in different shapes, and she was like,
Mm.
what do you think would be like the shape of the RNA or the ribonucleoprotein? And then I pointed to the one that was just like this, and I was like, I think it'd be this one because RNA is like all negative charge, so I think it would repel, so it wouldn't fold like together. And she was like, oh well, actually, like from the article it says that it's folded, but that's such like a good idea, and like and she was like really
Mm.
encouraged
Yeah,
by that.
exactly.
So yeah, like you said, you don't have to get it right, but just speak, just say anything, because
Yeah,
nothing
just don't
could
be
be.
silent. Being silent is the worst thing you can do.
Yeah. And then, did you have any maths questions?
I I did. That is the one in which I said that 2 + 6 was 9. It was sort of it was a differentiation question. There was also an integration question. It was like super basic though. It was something along the lines of, you have 100 meters of rope and you want to arrange it into a four-sided, you know, closed shape. How long should you make each side to maximize the area? And obviously intuitively you know, well, you make it square. But she wanted to know sort of how do you express that mathematically? How do you figure that out? And it was just differentiation in the end, even though I ended up saying that 2 + 6 was 9. So, you know, at the end of the day, it's just about thinking logically and speaking out loud and just, you know, making sure that your train of thought is intelligible to the interviewers.
Definitely, yeah. I think you've summed it up perfectly there, and I think like there's a lot for people to go off from there. And yes, that's really, really helpful. I've just got a few other like questions to like finish it off.
Yeah.
What would you like to see improved about the natural sciences course?
Oh, I really quite like the way it is at the moment. So I've been on the maths bio consultative like student committee this year, and it's really encouraging to me to see how they really take on board kind of student feedback, and they really care. Like, they pester us constantly with emails asking us for feedback because they really care about what we think. And the sort of support system within colleges, I mean, it varies from college to college, but generally speaking, the support system for natural sciences is really, really good. So there's actually very little I would change, other than the fact that the first year chemistry course is very geared towards physical scientists. So it definitely favors people who do physics, as it's quite mathsy. That's the only thing that I would change. Other than that, I've really enjoyed the year, and I wouldn't change much about it at all.
That's really, really good. That's really nice to hear as well. I'm sure if they ever watch this, they'll be so happy. But isn't it a case where like, so there's some option combinations you can't take? Do you know much about that?
Yeah, so it's mostly just a timetabling thing. I think there are certain combinations of subjects that just the timetables clash. But they're sort of subjects that you would not particularly normally take together, like some biology subject and some, you know, very hard science physics subject. I don't remember exactly what it is, but it's mostly just timetabling complications, and they will work their absolute hardest to get you to take any combination possible. I mean, there are 30 natural sciences students in my college, and I'm the only one taking the combination that I did, and the supervisors all shuffled around all of their supervisions to try and fit my timetable. Like, they really try their hardest so that you can take the courses that you want to take, which is really nice.
Yeah, that's so generous and that's so nice. And yeah, I forgot to ask about supervisions. How do you find supervisions? What do they typically look like?
I mean, when I first got to Cambridge, to me, supervision, like every single supervision was like another interview. I was absolutely terrified. That's the initial sort of feeling that you get. But you sort of get to know your supervisors after a while, and it almost becomes like a weird sort of, strange power dynamic friendship, where they just want to help you to try and like achieve your potential. And they're not testing you, they're just trying to push you so that you can think about things in like different ways. I mean, the whole thing is just about cultivating like a scientific mindset and being able to think independently. So they're definitely a really, really useful tool for being able to like push your knowledge and make sure you really, really properly understand the lecture material.
Have you got a particularly memorable tute? Sorry, I keep calling them tutes, but they're supervisions for you, sorry.
Well, I remember in biology of cells, I think at some point in Lent term, I showed up to a supervision fairly confident on the lecture material, and I sat down at the table and she asked me what sounded like a very basic question about DNA replication. And I just couldn't answer it. I had absolutely no idea. And she said that essentially sometimes you have to pick up on the little things during lectures. And she started pointing out all these tiny little things from the lecture recordings that nobody had listened to. And she said, this is the stuff that is really important. This is the stuff that defines like eukaryotic DNA replication versus prokaryotic DNA replication. And just because they don't focus on it doesn't mean it's not important and stuff like that. It really made me question, like, have I been listening enough in the lectures? Have I been focusing? Stuff like that. And it really pushes you, which can be at some points nerve-wracking and at some points demoralizing. But if you can take away the positivity from it, if you can take away the lessons and try to improve from it, then it's worth it.
No, definitely. And I'm just quite nosy because I've done prokaryotic DNA replication earlier this year, and I'm doing eukaryotic. I'm going through the lectures at the moment, so I was just wondering if you can tell me like which part of the eukaryotic DNA replication did you like miss out and like small bits.
It was something to do with the PCNA sliding clamp. And I don't remember the exact question, but it was some like very specific detail about it that apparently was like a vital difference between the two types of replication that like everyone in my supervision had just completely missed. So it was really eye-opening to sort of, get a different view on it, because obviously, from a leader in their field, they know what's important, and it might be different from what you pick up in the lectures.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and they're the ones who are going to be writing the questions in the exams and things. So it's great that you're getting taught by them to know exactly like the really important bits of the course. So yeah, that's really, really good. And then I suppose to finish off on like a happy note, what's been your favourite thing about your first year at Cambridge?
The people. I mean, it's so cringy, but you think that you're going to get to Cambridge and you think it's going to be full of people who are really competitive and, not very nice, and people who have all come from one sort of particular socioeconomic backgrounds of red trouser aristocrats. And I haven't met a single one of them, not to say that they're not all, that they're not lovely people. But it is just full of normal people with normal flaws who get questions wrong, and you will find friends who you don't think are like these strange people that sit in their rooms and never leave, and you can have a social life. I think for me, realizing that and making such a tight-knit group of friends that I've really bonded with through probably through the stressful environment, has actually been so amazing, and I wouldn't change it for the world.
Well, that's so nice to hear, and I totally agree. It is the people, and whether from a private school or state school or anything, everyone just seems to be so lovely. And
yeah, exactly. Everyone is just really, really wonderful, and everyone comes together, especially over everyone absolutely adores their subject, and so if that's one thing you're going to bond over, you definitely will.
Exactly, yeah. And I suppose everyone has such a large workload that you are all in it together, so it's just
exactly.
really nice environment to be in.
The sense of community is amazing.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's so important to highlight that to applicants, that it isn't a really scary, horrible place, because it isn't.
Exactly.
yeah, such lovely places to be. But yeah, thank you so much for talking to me today. It's been so
No
interesting to hear
problem.
more about Bionatsky, and yeah, good luck with the rest of your degree. Sounds so exciting.
Thank you. Thank you. You
See you
too.
soon.
See
Bye.
you. Bye.
Bye.